All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Michelle Smith. I'm with Collegiate Edu-Nation, and I've invited Carli Diver, who is a Lytle alumni, graduated from Lytle in 2016, and she is now a flight nurse, and she has come to share her experiences with us and talk a little bit to our junior and high school kids about how she landed into this field and her interest in it, and we'll just give her a chance to say hey and get started.
All right. Well, good morning, y'all. Like Mrs. Smith said, my name is Carli. Graduated from Lytle in 2016, but I went to Lytle from kindergarten on through 12th grade. And so I'm kind of just going to walk y'all through kind of my career path and, starting in high school, kind of what I started doing through college, the beginning of my nursing career, and then kind of how I ended up here with AeroCare. I also have a few pictures here and a video or two, just to kind of show y'all what our aircraft looks like, kind of what daily stuff looks like for us. So all right, yeah, and then like Miss Smith said, if y'all have any questions, feel free to interrupt me at any point. This is going to be kind of pretty informal, just me talking to y'all about just daily stuff. So um on this first picture here, this is our aircraft. It's almost a complete picture of it. I was kind of trying to capture more of the sunrise that morning, but this is my office. This is what I work in every day. This is me with our aircraft in our flight suits. That's our uniform that we wear every day. That was my preceptor and I, the person who trained me into being a nurse. So I'll go ahead and get started real quick with just my career path. So starting in high school, at the time I always knew I wanted to do something medical. I was that weird little kid that loved watching, trauma shows on TV, ER, all that stuff. So I always knew I wanted to do something medical. So starting in high school, we had at the time kind of the biggest medical thing that we had was the athletic training program. So starting freshman year, started taking sports med, got involved with that. And then did that all through, all 4 years through high school. And then starting senior year, we were able to do the pharmacy tech program. So I got involved in that, got my pharmacy tech license, and that actually was a huge help when I got to nursing school of like knowing medications and things like that. It was incredibly helpful to already have that background. And it was a nice, little job to have, while you're in school, to already be kind of working in the healthcare industry. So in high school, I kind of weighed my options on colleges and things, and went to a few, toured a few, and then ended up at Texas Tech University in Lubbock. I loved tech. I ended up getting a really good scholarship through a private foundation to go to school there. Was really blessed with that. So when I started at tech and kind of my whole high school career, I was always going to be pre-med. Like that was my thing. I was, taking AP biology, every class that I could that was anything related to the pre-medicine world and just, healthcare in general. So I got to college, and at tech, you can declare as pre-med, but you have to pick a major. So I picked biochemistry. And I started my biochemistry classes at freshman year, and I was like, I don't think this is for me. I really didn't enjoy the classes I was taking. I didn't really have a big passion for biochemistry, and those things are important in nursing and in healthcare. But I was like, I don't think I can do this for 4 years to possibly get into med school at the end of it. And then if I don't get into med school the first time, I have this degree that I just don't care much about. So I started looking at some other options and decided on nursing. And I was, I didn't want to feel like I'd let myself down. Going from, pre-medicine and this really like high caliber track, I was like, I don't know about nursing, but once I started taking the pre-nursing classes, I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be. Started taking, anatomy classes, pathophysiology classes, these really, really cool things that I'm like, I'm getting to do this right now. I'm not having to wait 4 years to do this in med school. And then, especially once I got into nursing school and I started doing this, I was like, this is where I wanted to be anyway. The getting to be with the patients at the bedside, taking care of them, is incredible. And um, nurses, are an incredibly important part of the healthcare team. And now I realize that what I want to do is way more aligned with nursing than it ever was with medicine. So I was really thankful to have that background, but then to end up where I am now. So I did 2 years of prereq classes at Tech, getting ready for nursing school, and then applied to Texas Tech's nursing school, got in there, and then it's 8 semesters, but we have to go year round, like during the summer. So in about 18 months, I had graduated from nursing school. And I, coming up here and going to Tech, I fell in love with Lubbock. And much to my parents' chagrin, I decided to stay and be 6.5 hours away from home. But I love it. And I started I started as an ER nurse right out of nursing school at a University Medical Center, which is the level 1 trauma center here in Lubbock. So, seeing the worst of the worst, the sickest patients, the worst traumas. And I was like, this is where I want to be. This is what I want to do. But while I was in nursing school, we had a couple of professors that had done flight nursing, and hearing them talk about it, I was like, you know what? I think that is my ultimate dream job, dream goal. That is what I want to do. So from day one of starting my job, I knew that I wanted to become a flight nurse. And it is a very difficult field to get in. It's pretty selective, but it's entirely doable. It just takes a lot of work and a lot of dedication. It's kind of a select field. So like I said, from the beginning, I was like, this is what I want to do. So I didn't, go to work, clock in, clock out, and just call it good. At work, I was constantly asking, our physicians, our, other members of the care team, like respiratory therapists, paramedics that I would see in the ER, constantly asking them questions, trying to grow myself as a clinician, and really doing a lot of self-study. And so kind of to get into flight nursing, the kind of requirements are at least 3 years of experience in either an ICU or an ER. Preferred like bigger hospitals where you can see, more critical patients. But I work with a lot of people who, worked at smaller hospitals, and they are just as good, if not better, nurses and medics than I am. And then as well as some advanced certifications, there's different tests and different things that you can do to kind of make yourself stand out, which shows that, not only are you an ER nurse, but you've gone through the process, you've taken this test to really certify yourself. And then you have to have your bachelor's degree, your BSN in nursing. And then just other things like other classes that we have to take, different trauma classes, things like that are preferred as well. So after I had been an ER nurse for 4 years, and then back in March, I saw this job opening, and oh yeah, absolutely. Mr. Lopez, go ahead.
I have to come off mute. There we go. Go ahead. I think it's off.
Hello?
Oh.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Carly, can you hear me? Okay, I'm so proud of you. I love, especially from a small town, making those. I'll take you back a little bit to maybe to high school, junior high. What strategies or skills did you use in studying? What did you do? Because I know there's a lot of courses you took to be a nurse. I just
Carly,
how
can
you
you?
kind of studied and what kind of notes you did listening to lectures here at Lidl?
Yeah, you're coming through a little bit broken, but I think are you asking about like what kind of study habits and things I did while I was in like junior high and high school?
It's a bad
That's
connection.
what I was wondering about. What skills and strategies did you use to help you take notes, listen to your professor, study for the exam, those kind of things? What would you do?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I was always a big reader. I read a lot. I was always kind of a visual learner. So I would, and I'll be honest, I wasn't the best at studying in junior high, and I got a little bit better in high school. But I was always a really avid reader, really quick reader. So I would take kind of what we learned in class, and then try and go back later. I would usually give it a little bit of a break, especially if there was something that I was struggling to understand. I would, listen to it in class, and then I would either when I got home or the next day, kind of go back and try to look at what it was that I was struggling with, and try to go back over it once I'd had a little bit of a break. Another thing I did, and this was really helpful in high school and college, was I took a lot of notes, because I found that if I could take something that someone was teaching me and write it down in my own words, one, it showed that I really understood it if I was able to write it in my own words. But two, writing it down is really what solidifies it for me. And I'm still doing that. So I'm actually currently studying for my advanced flight certification. And what I'm doing with that is, taking practice tests on all these different subjects. And then whatever questions I miss from those practice tests, I go in and I study that, write it all down, and look it up myself. So that was kind of my biggest thing. But I'll be honest, it took me a long time to figure that out. Probably, I mean, well into probably nursing school before I really got a good study habit down and a good way of looking at stuff. And now, that's a big part of our job too, is that we are constantly, every month we have new education, and constantly new things that we're learning. So, I mean, I have not stopped going to school, ever. And that's what I love a lot about this job, and especially about healthcare, is there's always new things to learn. Everything's, constantly changing. But, yeah, that was kind of my biggest thing. And another thing too is going to different people. I would do that sometimes, of like, if I was math, to me, surprisingly was something that I struggled with. So I would try, if I wasn't understanding it the way one teacher was teaching it, and I, had talked to them and we'd kind of exhausted that route, I would maybe go to a different math teacher, or just to like a different teacher in general, and see if maybe they had a different way of explaining it that would make more sense to me than that one way. Because there's a million different teaching styles, a bunch of different learning styles. So I would say if you're having trouble with something, reach out to maybe a different teacher or something like that, and see if someone can maybe explain it to you a little bit differently than how you're currently learning it. Does that kind of answer your question? Okay. All right. So kind of jumping back into like flight nursing qualifications and things like that. Um, like I said, what kind of made me stand apart, I think, was a lot of the self-study that I'd done, and really preparing myself, not just to get the job, because getting the job is really the easiest part of all of this. After that, it's not just, getting in and saying I'm a flight nurse. It's, I want to be the best flight nurse I can. I want to provide the best care possible to our patients. And I'll be honest, I did not expect to get this job the first time I applied. So like I said, I applied back in March. I'd been a nurse for 4 years, so just 1 year over the minimum. And there was about 14 other applicants for this one position. And I really expected to, just get my foot in the door, get in front of, this company, and have my name be known. And if I didn't get it the first time, that was going to be okay. Just take whatever feedback they would give me, keep learning, keep studying, and, apply again. And very surprisingly, I got the job on the first go round. So, and like I said, that was the easy part. After we got the job, we go to Denton up by Dallas for training for a week. And if I thought I knew anything before I went down there, I was sorely mistaken because it was just so much information. But I left there with I was a little bit overwhelmed with all the information, and I was like, I don't know anything. I don't know why I got this job. I don't know if I'll ever be as smart as these people that are teaching me, or ever be as good of flight clinicians as they are. But then once I got, actually to work and started training with my preceptor that you see there in the picture, I was like, okay, I think I can do this. I think I can do this job. And ever since then, it has just been amazing. Like it is the world's coolest job. I love it. I could talk about it all day. Not only do you get to provide an exceptionally high level of care to these patients, but you get to do it, 2,000 feet in the air wearing a cool flight suit. So, but yeah, the biggest things I think that have led me to be successful in this job is just continuing to be a learner, be a lifelong learner. Like I said, that's why one of my favorite things about healthcare is this field is always changing, and there is always going to be someone that is smarter than you, that has more experience, that has done more, has seen more. So yeah, that's just one of my favorite things about this job and about this field. And I get to work with some amazingly smart people. That is the kind of the other thing. So our flight teams I'm a nurse and I always work with a paramedic partner. So, and that's a really good balance because I have the experience, of being in the hospital and working with kind of this critical care stuff. And then my paramedic partner has a lot of experience with like pre-hospital things like that. And so it's kind of two different backgrounds that work really well when you put them together. As far as the paramedic side, kind of the same requirements of, 3 years experience in a busy, area. Paramedics are not required to have a bachelor's degree, but they are required to have national paramedic certifications and things like that, as well as the other, certifications and trainings and certificates and things. But yeah, I love working with our paramedic partners. Does anyone have any other questions kind of at this point?
I was going to ask you, because this is high school and junior high students that'll be observing. I'm sure there's some questions about what type of scenes have you been flown to? What type of accidents, injuries? I mean, without being,
Yeah.
but yeah, that would be interesting, I think, to know what have you flown up on and seen.
Yeah. Yeah. We see it all. So like she was talking about, so we do kind of two types of calls. So we do scene calls, which is where we fly to, the scene of an accident, or, we're landing on the side of the road or something like that to get patients. And then, the other part of what we do is transfers. So our base, I'm based out of Lovington, New Mexico, which is kind of almost right on the Texas, New Mexico border. And we are based at a what we call critical access hospital. So like hospitals in like Devine or Jourdanton Hondo or Jourdanton, they're what we call critical access hospitals. So sometimes they're staffed with like nurse practitioners, physician's assistants. Sometimes there are physicians there, but a lot of times the doctors that are there are not necessarily ER trained doctors. They're family medicine doctors, other things like that are covering the ER. So when really sick patients come in that need, surgery or trauma care, or, they're having a stroke or a heart attack, they call us to transfer that patient to a bigger hospital, like say one in San Antonio, or for us, we go to Lubbock a lot. So that is probably 90% of what we do are the hospital transfers like that. And then the other 10% is the really cool stuff of getting to land on scene. So I've done a few car accidents landing on the side of the road. My very first one, I was, really excited because, traffic is stopped everywhere. You've got, first responders on scene. People are taking videos of you coming into land. And I remember, getting out of the helicopter, and we have this giant red bag that has all of our supplies in it. Probably weighs about 20 pounds. So I jump out with the bag and we're walking to the ambulance. So our patients, you know, will be in the ambulance already with the ground EMS crew. And so we hop in the ambulance. So I go to climb in the ambulance and the bag gets stuck on the door and I like have to almost fall down, but caught myself, had to step down off the ambulance, open up the other door. So I was like, well, there went my really cool, you know, superhero moment of landing on this thing, having everyone take pictures of me. So I got humbled a little bit already on my first car accident. But yeah, we do pick up a lot of critically injured patients, car accidents, you know, shooting, stabbings. That happens pretty often in the area that we're based out of. So that's really the coolest part of the job, is getting to land on scenes like that. But like I said, that's about 10% of the job. 90% of it is a lot of going into the hospital. But the thing I really love about, while it may not be as cool as, you know, landing on the side of the road and having everyone take pictures of you, the relief that you get to see on this, you know, on the staff and the physician and the patient, their family, the relief when we walk into the room, because they know that their family member is going to get, you know, to that hospital, they're going to get the care that they need. That is really one of the coolest parts of the job, knowing that we get to be the ones to show up and, you know, take this patient and provide really good care for them. So that is a really cool part of the job too.
Do you do things like nursing type things, like starting IVs and taking blood pressures and doing the while you're in the air, or when
Yes.
you're on the road? I mean, how's that work?
Yeah, so here I actually have some pictures of our helicopter, of the inside of it, to kind of give you guys an idea of what it looks like. So, and it's a really small space. So you'll see those two seats right there. I usually sit on the right side and my partner sits right here. So this little sled part right here, the little cone shaped one, that is where the patient's head is. So as you can see, the patient's head is essentially in my partner's lap most of the time. And then our monitor is kind of right here. Can you see the cursor on the screen? Okay. This right here is our ventilator. And then this is where the patient goes. We have an additional seat right here. This is usually where all of our equipment sits, that big red bag I was talking about. But we also can take, so for like when we're flying out kids or, you know, pediatric patients, sometimes if weight allows, we can take a parent with us, or if the child isn't, you know, critically sick, we can take someone with us. Or when I was on orientation and I was being trained, that was my seat, you know, flying with my nurse that was training me. This is where the patient goes. So you can see it's not a very wide space. So we do have to measure our patients sometime to make sure that they can fit in there. And if they can't fit, then unfortunately, sometimes we can't transport those patients. But then right next to it, that is the dash, and the pilot sits right here. So the patient's feet actually go pretty much directly next to the pilot. Which is another thing, we have to make sure our patients are secure so they don't, you know, freak out and kick our pilots or anything that would make for kind of a bad day. But yeah, so the patient's arms usually are pretty, you know, down next to them, and we can really only reach the patient from about chest down. So anything else that we need to do that's, you know, from their waist down, we have to do on the ground before we take off. So if we need to put any bandages on, do anything with that, all has to be done before we can put them in the helicopter. We can get to like their head. So if we need to do something with that, put oxygen on them, we can do that. We can get to their arms sometimes if they're a smaller patient and if we can maneuver them enough. But I have to like get out of my seat belt, all that stuff. Another thing with this is we really can't do CPR in a helicopter. So if a patient is bad enough off that we think we may have to do CPR, we have to kind of stay where we are and get them more stable before we can put them in there. You can't really stand up in there. There's not enough room to stand up fully. Actually, when I sit up straight, my helmet hits the top of the helicopter. So not a whole lot of room in there to do a lot of stuff. So most of our stuff that we do is done on the ground, but we can do things in the air if we absolutely have to, but we try to not do that. So a lot of what we're doing in the air is is, monitoring the patient with our monitor right there. If they're on the ventilator, we can make changes to those things. We can give a lot of medicine. We carry an incredible amount of medicine on the aircraft, so we can give them medicine and things like that. But a lot of our skills we're going to be doing on the ground before we get in the helicopter. That's a little bit closer picture of the seat. So yeah, when you have someone sitting right there, your feet are kind of like layered on each other. There's not a lot of leg room. So, but this was a picture of us. So we also do another part of our job is we do a lot of public relations, and we'll come out and do training exercises with different local fire departments and EMS. So this was a training scenario that we did with the Hobbs Fire Department, which is a town just south of where we are. So we landed out at the airport, and there's a patient on this stretcher. I'm right there in that little white helmet. But it was to simulate a burn patient. So we went and picked up the patient, loaded them up into the helicopter, and flew them over to the local hospital, just to kind of practice a scenario like that before we would need it. But we do a lot of things with fire departments, like letting them come out, see the helicopter. And then whenever we come into land, like when we're landing on the side of the road, we really can't land unless all of these guys are there and have set everything up for us. They come in, they make sure the area is safe, make sure it's going to be safe for us to land. And so we really couldn't do a lot of what we do for scene calls without them. So we do a lot of public relations with them, come out and do a lot of training. And these are just some really cool pictures of sunsets and things. And you can see we fly over a lot of farmland, a lot of oil sites. But we do get to go south to like El Paso sometimes, and getting to fly through the mountains in El Paso is it's beautiful.
Do you have any idea what one of those helicopters costs?
I think it's in the millions. I do know that it is quite a bit to maintain. So our maintenance people are amazing, and we really couldn't do our jobs without them. But there's constantly something to maintain on there. So we have to do a lot of like preventative maintenance or scheduled, where they come in, do inspections, all this stuff after so many hours of flight. And then of course it's a lot of moving parts. So if things break or whatever, they do a lot of maintenance on that. But yeah, they're not cheap. Does any of the students have any other questions or anything?
Any questions from the group? Y'all want to put them in the chat if you can't come off mute? Let's see. Miss McDonald said, our students loved hearing about your career. Great job, Carli.
Great, thank you.
Nikki Barrett says, I'm so proud of you, Carli.
Yes, thank you. And then, yeah, that was just a picture that my partner got to take of me when we were flying. So that was my little action shot. But you can see how close we sit together. That's her leaning up against the door to take that picture. Yeah, usually we can like just lean over and bump shoulders most of the time. So you got to be kind of good with tight spaces if you're gonna fly in the helicopter.
So how long is a flight?
Our usual flights. So a lot of times when we leave out of eastern New Mexico, it's about a 40-minute flight to Lubbock, which is an hour and a half drive most of the time. We do, like I said, go to El Paso. When we go to El Paso, it's usually about an hour and a half. We can go to Amarillo. That one's usually about an hour and 20 minutes. We do go as far as like Las Cruces, New Mexico, which is farther west. We can go up to Albuquerque. I haven't done those flights yet personally. Those are usually pretty few and far between when we do those flights, but the majority of the time we're going to Lubbock.
Okay.
How serious the injury has to be before they call us? So a lot of times there is certain criteria of what of when they call us for. So anytime someone is And a lot of times it's the 911 dispatcher. So when you call 911, the person that answers the phone, a lot of times they're the ones that are launching us and getting us on the way, is because they're talking to that person and they hear certain injuries. So shootings, stabbings, bad car wrecks where someone has maybe been like, thrown out of the car, anything like that, they'll call us for. But if it doesn't sound that bad, but then the paramedics get on scene, the ones on the ground ambulance, and then they determine that this patient's pretty bad, then they'll call us. There's pretty certain criteria about when a patient should go to a trauma center, if they have certain injuries like head injuries, burns, big chest injuries, things like that. They'll call us. Same thing with strokes or heart attacks, things that are really time sensitive. They'll call us for those as well. Just because, like I said, we can get the patient there in 40 minutes versus an hour and a half to 2 hour drive. So they'll call us for that kind of stuff. And then, like I said, a lot of what we do too is taking patients from one hospital to another. So they get into the hospital, and a lot of times in our area, it's that there's only one ambulance for the county. And so if that patient needs to go to another hospital, that ambulance can't afford to leave the county to go transport that patient and be gone for 3 hours. So a lot of times that's why we're transporting them as well. Or they're an EMT, so they're only able to do certain skills. They're not able to give certain medications. So they'll call us for that too. If the patient's going to need certain medications or certain equipment that they don't have. We also carry blood on our ambulance or on our aircraft. So if a patient needs blood, like if they're bleeding from an injury or from some kind of internal bleeding, they'll call us because they know we carry blood, and we can give the patient blood on the way to the hospital and potentially save their life. That's a really big thing, and a really like shining part of our program. Advice for students on how to manage time for fun and studying. This is a big thing. It's a big thing, even now in junior high and high school, especially in college. But especially when you get into this job too, obviously you can kind of guess we see some pretty intense stuff. And so a really good school and life balance or work and life balance is really important. And it took me a while too, even once I got into this job, to kind of maintain that balance. And my advice would be, find something that you like to do that's not related to school or your job or anything like that. Like find something. I'm a big reader, like I said earlier, but I love to read fun stuff like, thrillers, mysteries, books like that. So I'll do a lot of reading. A lot of times, hanging out with friends and family, especially my non-healthcare friends, because I'll start telling them stories and, it sounds so normal to me. And you're like, that's a really crazy day, or like, that's a really crazy day at work, that you were taking care of someone who, is missing an arm. And I'm like, oh, I guess that is kind of crazy, huh? And so they just help put it in perspective for you. But yeah, I say just, pick something that's, away from school, or away from whatever it is, job or whatever that you're working. And just, I mean, even if you have to like set a timer on your phone, of like, I used to do that when I was studying, of like setting a timer, because one, it kept me motivated to continue studying, because I knew I had a break. I was like, okay, I just have to do this for 15 more minutes, and then I can take a 15-minute break. But then also setting a timer of like, okay, my break is up and it's time to get back to studying. And if you have to reward yourself, like, okay, at this break, I'm going to go, get a soda or something, or, run and get a snack or something like that. So just kind of like breaking it up, I think is helpful too, even if, like I said, you got to set something on your phone, or have like, hey, remind, text your parents or your friends, like, hey, come pull me out of here in a little bit, if I've been in here for too long studying. So just kind of setting little routines like that for yourself can be really helpful.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. So what does your future hold? Are you going to be a flight nurse forever? Is there another advancement to this, or is this a career you do for a little while and go back to the hospital?
Yeah, so I would love to do this forever. I think it's the world's coolest job. But so kind of what our schedule is like is we work 24-hour shifts and then do 24 hours off. So our base is kind of set up like a fire station. Like we've got, our bedrooms, we've got a kitchen, we've got all that stuff, living room, kind of like a little house. So we do that for a week. So, I'll go to work on Friday, come home Saturday, go to work Sunday, and, do that for a week. So there's some people that can make that work with like, family and kids and things like that. And then other people, can do this part-time where they do, 2 shifts instead of 4 shifts in a row. So I'm not sure what that looks like yet for me, but like I said, I love this job. But I also love to teach. When I was in the hospital, I would precept new nurses, teach them, straight out of nursing school, how to become an ER nurse. I would love to do that in this job someday too. Definitely need a few years of experience under my belt before I start doing that. But no, I would love to teach. So I've tossed around the idea too of getting my master's in nursing and becoming either like an educator. So there's a few different education routes. You can do like nursing school, where you're teaching people to become nurses, or you can be an educator like with a flight service or in the hospital where you're teaching baby nurses how to become ER nurses. Because a lot of nursing school, I'd say it's about 20% foundation and then about 80% on the job learning of learning your different roles. Because nursing is such a diverse field, and there's so many different things. So there's no way that nursing school could teach you how to do all the different nursing jobs. And that's another thing I love about this field is, if next week I'm like, hey, I'm tired of this, I could go back to the hospital, I could do home health, I could do, school nursing or administrative business. There's so many different routes to take in nursing. And that's one of my favorite things about this field. Is there's so many different opportunities and diverse things that you can do. So for me right now, it's flight nursing all the way until, as long as I can make that work with life and things. And then after that, maybe some teaching or maybe teaching and flight nursing, who knows? One of the nurses at our base actually has her PhD in nursing, and she teaches at the local junior college, and she's a professor and then also flies part-time. So that's always an option as well.
Can you tell us a little bit about some of the certifications that, like, starting at very basic, like CNA, what are some of the certifications that move up before you actually become a registered nurse?
Yeah. So sorry, my dogs ran into the room. So you can start with CNA. That is absolutely a great place to start. So I know like certain high schools offer CNA programs, but for tech nursing, actually now one of the requirements to get into nursing school is to have your CNA. Which you can do it. Some programs take, a month and you can become a certified CNA. I think that is a really good option. I didn't personally become a CNA because I was, doing a lot of other programs and stuff while I was in college and preparing to go to nursing school. But I think that's a really vital experience. It's important to learn those skills. But the biggest thing I think is getting to interact with patients and getting to interact in that professional healthcare sense, which really cannot be understated. Because I remember walking into my first patient's room and I was like, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to, it's talking and, working with sick people is really an art. Because you can't approach, someone who's been, who's really sick or injured in the way that you approach a normal conversation. So I think, having that background of CNA would be really helpful. The kind of other route is EMT, which I work with several nurses who are also EMTs before they went to nursing school. So starting at that is kind of your basic EMT, which is kind of similar to a CNA. They can, drive the ambulance, they can take vitals, they can give very few medications, do assessments. Kind of a step up from that is an advanced EMT. So they are an intermediate EMT. They can do IVs, they can give a few more medications and do a few more skills. And then kind of the top out of that is paramedics. So that's who we work with. They can do all of the skills, and they can, give medications, give IV things, all of those things, put someone on, put a tube in for them to breathe and put them on a ventilator, things like that. So that is another route as well. And then I know several paramedics who, became paramedics and then went to nursing school and became nurses. So that's always an option too. But yeah, I think starting with that is great. But if that, like I said, if it's not in the cards for you or it's not something that you're able to do, don't let that stop you from, trying to be in a healthcare career. Like you can start kind of at any point. So if you're able to do that, great. If not, don't let it discourage you from trying to pursue something in healthcare.
Good. So do we have any questions from the group? Anybody wants to come off mute, or if you want to put them in the chat? We're winding up. Carli, did you get through all of your?
Yes. Yeah. We got through. The only other one was was the video of us
Okay.
coming into land, but which is kind of loud. But
That's all right. That's cool. Bye. You just did. Sorry about that.
that's all right. How many patients do we normally see in a day or a week? So in the hospital, a ton. In the hospital, I mean, all day, every day, especially in the busy, level 1 ER that I worked in. However, in this job, it really varies. And that was something that it took a lot of getting used to, was the workflow of going from, constantly being busy all 12 hours of your shift versus here, a lot of times you're just kind of waiting around until you get a call. So like usually we do at least one flight a day. And our turnaround time for flights, usually to Lubbock, is about 3 hours. So one patient transport will take us about 3 hours. And that accounts for flight time there, flight time home, time spent with the patient, picking them up, dropping them off, all that good stuff. So usually we do about one flight a day. I have done 4 flights in 12 hours before. That was a really crazy day. And I literally only sat down, I think, for 2 hours in that whole 12 that we weren't with a patient or weren't flying. And so that's kind of one of the cool things about this job, is that, you could be incredibly busy, you could not. But like I said, there's always education and always stuff and training for us to do. So even on our downtime, we're usually doing some kind of training, some kind of education. We do cook a lot. We do make some pretty good food at base. But another cool thing about our base specifically is that we're based at a hospital. So when we're not busy, we can go over to the ER and we can go help them out. Start IVs, do things like that with those patients. So how much does a flight nurse make? So this is actually kind of an interesting thing, and something that I didn't quite know before I got into it. So nursing is a really good place to start career-wise as far as making money. I think starting out as a nurse in the hospital, you can make about 70 to 80,000 a year. That's, as a nurse in Lubbock, depending on if you work in like a city like Austin or San Antonio that has a higher cost of living, you might make more. But starting, and I mean, anytime you start at a new company or new hospital, usually you can expect a little bit of a drop in pay just because of, years of service, like years of experience, things like that. Flight nurses actually make less money than nurses in the hospital. And the reason for that is, like I said, we have a lot of downtime. If the weather's bad, like if it's really foggy or rainy, storming, we cannot fly. So then we are just grounded for the whole day. Or if our aircraft is broken, if there's some part that needs to be replaced or something like that, then we won't fly that day. And then other times, there's just times when you don't get a call, like, patients don't need you, which are good days for, everyone else in your area. For you, it may not be as a good day, but so I think to balance that out of your downtime versus the amount of hours that you're working, we do get paid a little bit less, and it also depends on what company you work for. So we're what we call a community-based program. There are certain hospital-based programs where it's you are a nurse in the hospital that also works on the helicopter. Those nurses usually make a little bit more because, like I said, they're hospital employees that also happen to work on the helicopter. But I will say, like, I don't know of anyone that does this job for the money. For like the amount of time that you spend, away from your family, or the hours, no one's doing this really for the money. I don't have any colleagues, I think, that do it for the money. You do this job because you love taking care of patients, you love healthcare, and because you like getting to fly around in a helicopter and do cool stuff like that. So you do still make pretty good money, like probably 60 to 70,000. And it also depends on how much overtime you work too. Like I worked quite a bit of overtime on my last pay period, and my check was double what it usually was. So there's always room to work, but then again, still maintaining that work-life balance of, they'll let you work as much as you want, but still maintaining that good, having hobbies and seeing your family and things like that. Just maintaining that good balance.
For clarification, Carly, when you're on call, even if you go in for a whole 24 hours and you don't get called out, you still get paid for that, correct?
Yes.
You're
Yes. So even if the weather's bad, and I've gone to work knowing that the weather was bad and knowing that we weren't going to fly, we're still getting paid the entire time. So we have 10 bases in our program, in 10 different cities. So if, let's say, our aircraft is down for the day, I can get sent to another base. So just on Sunday, I got sent up to Plainview, which is just north of Lubbock, and I worked there. So when you get sent there, they do pay you for mileage. Like you get paid so much for every mile that you drive. You get paid drive time. So on those, I get paid from the time I leave my house until the time I get home. So they do take care of us in that sense. And then we also get our meals covered. Like we get money for meals when we are working away from our base and stuff like that. So we do, the amount of hours that we get paid for is pretty good. It's just less money per hour, but it's usually works out about the same. And I think it's going to this year, from what I made working in the hospital to what I'm making now.
right. Very good. Well, Carly, we sure appreciate your time. This has been very informative for our students. I know we have a lot of students that are interested in health careers, and so being able to talk to an expert, particularly somebody that's already been there and done that, coming out of Lytle, I think this has been really helpful. So
Yeah,
thank you.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. And Mrs. Smith has my contact information, as does Miss McDonald. So if y'all have any questions or anything that comes up later, please feel free to contact me. Like I said, I could talk about this all the time, all day long. So yeah, anytime, y'all just let me know.
All right. Thank
All
you
right.
so
Thank y'all very
much.
much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.